you have a voice, you have a message, you may have a mission, but have you ever wanted to start a movement? You may or may not have, but I am excited because if you have, I have none other than Justin Schenk on the show, host of the Growth Now podcast, and he is going to be sharing with you how to start a movement. I'm going to bring him up right after we thank our sponsor. Every business needs a book, including yours. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com today to learn the 7 steps to publish and promote your nonfiction lead and profit-generating business book in 8 weeks. Once again, that's freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Justin Schenk. Justin, how are you feeling today?
Mario, I'm doing well, man. Excited to be here. Like we've been friends on social media for quite some time, and I'm like, when am I getting on that show? And so here we are, man. I'm excited about it.
Well, I'm excited to learn from you because it started at Podfest, an event. I remember hearing you speak, and there was a lot of different speakers there, and you were one of the ones that stood out to me. And not only that, but once I started seeing what you were, I mean, it was a great presentation, but once I saw what you were up to, you know, you got your show, you got your live events, you got your virtual events, you're doing so much. And I know you called your podcast the Growth Now Movement Podcast, but you really are starting a movement. And I've always felt you've had the heart and you do want to help people. And I just want to know, where does that stem from?
That's a great question, man. You know, I think for me, I'll go back a little ways, right? So growing up, in high school, I had a 1.7 GPA. My mom was in the middle of a 20-year opioid addiction, and my dad was in jail. And so when I look at that, all signs pointed to you've got no hope. And I fell in love after high school. I fell in love with the idea of entrepreneurship because clearly I wasn't going to college with a 1.7 GPA. And so I fell in love with this idea of entrepreneurship. And so as I went through the phases of life, I did the corporate life, I tried entrepreneurship. I had 3 failed businesses under my belt. And then about a little over 5 years ago, maybe 5.5 years ago, I discovered podcasts, and I was like, I want to start a show and I want to interview entrepreneurs so I can learn how to be a better entrepreneur. Because at that point I had failed miserably in business. And so that was the original idea behind the show. It was not intended to create a movement. It was not intended to do anything except for, hey, I want to learn something. But what ended up happening was 5 months before we actually launched the show, it was actually the worst day of my life. My sister called me and said, the doctor says you need to come. And I ended up driving 7.5 hours down to South Jersey I was up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts at the time. And I found my mom intubated in a hospital bed. And that was the day she lost her 20-year battle to opioids. And it was in that moment that I realized life was so much more than business and impressing people with the things that you've accumulated over life. And it was more about, how do I enjoy this journey? How do I find happiness even in the rock bottom moments? And I realized that was through consistent growth and understanding of focusing on ourselves to ensure happiness in our own lives. And that's really what the Growth Now movement became about. It became about those rock bottom moments and finding hope in them, and how do we create happiness in our lives. And I really feel like the movement happened and the live events and everything else that I've done from the podcast, I really feel like it happened because I stayed true to my purpose and I spoke from my heart. And I think a lot of times in podcasting, or, you know, what you do for a career, authoring books or anything like that, a lot of people try and give the message that they think people want to hear versus the message that they should be speaking. And so I really just was living a vulnerable path. And over time, an audience grew. Inc. magazine listed my podcast as a top 8 podcast every entrepreneur should follow. I've been able to speak all over this incredible country on podcasting and overcoming adversity. And then, of course, the live events and virtual events. And I do some retreats now and stuff like that. But it really started in that rock bottom moment. And then it was a journey for me to discover, how do I create happiness and self-love and growth. And now that I've been able to live in that for so many years, it's become the movement after that.
Well, I want to say sorry to hear, because I knew some of the things, but I didn't know all the specific details. So sincerely sorry to hear. But the silver lining I'm hearing a lot of great came from it, because there's so many people I feel, just whether they're in business or not, just go through life maybe unhappy with what they do, regardless of what it is. And I can relate to that second side of going, I really do love what I do. I remember I was playing with a game with my family and sister and mom and brother-in-law Christmas time, and it was just like, you give these quick answers or whatever, and I drew the one, it's like, if you had all the money in the world, what would you change about your life? And I remember without hesitating, I was like, honestly, nothing, but we'd travel more. I mean, I would still do what I do, but it's like, yeah, I'd probably get a private jet and, come visit people I don't see, the people that are at a distance, see them more often. But I wouldn't be like, oh, I can't wait to get out of what I do. I love doing this, so I can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
So my question would be, if there's someone who doesn't love what they do, whether it's, no matter what it is, what would you say to them right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that comes up a lot actually in conversation with me, whether it be with clients of mine or just people asking. Like I get emails a lot because of the podcast, and people saying, how do I do what you do? And honestly, the first thing is, we have to realize that we've all kind of been born with these limiting beliefs, right? And they come from our childhood. And I think that's why people don't do what they really truly love, is because they have this limiting belief, like they're not good enough, they're not worthy, they're not pretty enough or smart enough or any of these things. And I say to really anybody, like, look at me. Like, if this schlubbo can do it, anybody can do it, right? Like, that's just the reality of life. We have to be able to overcome those limiting beliefs. And so the first thing I would say to them is, they have to get uncomfortable. They have to get uncomfortable in their life. They have to do something that pushes their boundaries. They have to be able to step out of their little boxes they've created for themselves. Because in that box, it's comfort, which is fine. But outside of that box is happiness. And so number one is, you have to get uncomfortable. Number two, surround yourself with people who are going to push you and support you at the same time. It's not always easy to find those people, but we do that by showing up to the right rooms, whether it's going to Podfest and meeting somebody like Mario, or signing up for a mastermind, or going to a retreat, or just making sure we're in the right room at the right time. And I feel like those are the first two steps to anybody who's looking to get out of their stuck right now, whatever that looks like for them. And then the third thing is, take action. For the longest time, I read self-development books, and then I interviewed some of the top people in self-development, which you might be able to see some of them behind me, right? And I realized I was accumulating all this knowledge, but nothing was changing in my life. And I found that people become obsessed with being motivated. People become obsessed with getting information, but then they don't take action. No change happens in our life without action. And so those are the three things I tell them to do. Get uncomfortable, surround yourself with the right people, and then the third one, take action, and start to create that life that you truly desire.
So I'm loving what you're sharing, and you're going to love the second half later on, especially with what you're talking about, and you'll see soon. But with all the people you've had on the show, because you've had some very, very impressive people, and for anyone listening, check out the video on the show notes page. But he has all these people listed behind him of episodes of his show, and check out his show. I mean, it's great. I've listened to it. And how do you have such high profile people on there? I have like 58 questions I want to ask you, and I'm just going to jump back. I'm like trying to combine like 18 things at once. But I want to make a joke about the GPA and ask you, how did you have such a high one in high school? Because I had a 0.7 at one point. I had a 0.7 at one point.
That's crazy.
I didn't want to cut you off when you were sharing about the other stuff, but I'll never forget. It was like going lower and lower, or was it a 0.8? Whatever it was under a 1. I got to find that letter. My friend Megan comes to the door, and I'm sitting there. I don't know why I'd be sitting there. I walked to the door, and I was eating an apple, and she's like, she comes in, And she's like, is this for real? Like, are you trying? Like, how do you even do this? Like, she's like, you're just going to eat an apple. Like, you don't have a point 0.8 in for overall GPA. So yeah, I could relate on that note. But what I was saying about the high profile people, how do you bridge that gap with the limiting beliefs? Because it sounds like our backgrounds are similar in the academic regard. How do you be around all these high profile people and just be normal, know you can handle it, know you're worthy, know how do you make that shift? Because I know there's people that have, whether, let's just say they're all business owners and they're all successful. Some of them still tell me behind the scenes they're still struggling with ABCD or whatever. How do you see yourself now after everything and know, hey, here's where I'm supposed to be?
Yeah, I'll tell you a brief story, and I'll tell you why it's become easy for me. It's not that I don't question the worthiness of it at times. It's not that I don't have those limiting beliefs of I don't belong here. This is crazy. Like some of my friends, I'm like, what are you doing hanging out with me, right? And so it's not like those moments don't happen. But here's the facts. When I started my podcast, it was like most podcasts, and I was doing like 30, 40, 50 downloads an episode, right? Nobody was really listening. I was in this phase of like, do I even keep going? Does anybody care? Like, what am I doing? And somebody reached out to me from Japan and said, because of your show, I decided not to take my life. And I realized in that moment that I have a purpose and a message, and the podcast is the vehicle to get that out there. And me connecting with these high profile people is the opportunity to reach even more individuals with my message and everything else that I'm doing. And so it's not the whole, like, how do I feel 100% comfortable, but it's understanding that my purpose is larger than the fear or the question marks I have in my head. And so if I can tie everything to my purpose, it makes it a lot easier to step up. It takes it a lot easier to take control of those situations and say yes to things that might be a little bit uncomfortable, right? Like I still get nervous when I speak. I still, get a little dry in the mouth when I'm interviewing bigger name guests at times. I have all those moments in my life still. But it's the understanding of I'm going to continue to show up and I'm going to continue to get better every single time. And over time, obviously the accolades have helped, right? Like when you're recognized as a top 8 by Inc. or all the other things that I've been featured on that I can't even remember right now. But, you get those little winks from the universe that say, you know what, buddy, you're on the right path. Just keep going. And that's what I hold on to. And I keep moving forward and know that every single time I get in the room with those people, every single time I have the opportunity to interview them, it's one step closer to reaching the millions of lives that I want to reach with my message.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, there's so many people that hesitate in that right there. I think they're going to realize don't. Because like you're saying, you have to start, but once you keep going. So I want to ask you about the ink and the other things. Does it start washing away some, or at least pushing back the self-doubt and self-judgment, the self-whatever? The more good stuff that is clear and obvious, do you feel it actually helps push some of that away, or is it just keep it fresh in your mind that, this is your new life?
That's a good question, man. I don't think it necessarily pushes away. Like it gives a flash of like, I'm on the right path. But I would say more than anything, the things that really help me with the worthiness and everything like that is really the things that I've instilled into my life regularly, right? Whether it's the meditation or the things that I say to myself in the mirror, like I am worthy, I am great, I am, all these things, and doing this on a regular basis. I also do a thing that we actually we just did this with the people that attended our retreat in Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago. And essentially what it is, you write a letter to yourself, essentially letting yourself off the hook for all the things that you kind of feel bad about, all the things that you've been carrying around, all those things. And you obviously say, I am worthy, and you light this letter on fire. And what it is you letting go of these limiting beliefs or letting go of the things that you've done in the past that you might kind of say, I shouldn't have done that, or wow, I really messed that up, or wow, like I'm not that great. And you let it go. And it's a symbolization of like really setting this on fire and never allowing it to come back into your life. But it's that type of work, that mental work that we can do every single day to constantly improve the strength that we have internally, right? You have to do that inner work in order to show it on the outside. And so there's little things that you can do to help you with those question marks. Like I said, the Inc. magazine stuff, it's a cool little flash in the pan. And I feel I'm super grateful that it happened, but it didn't really change who I was. It just gave me an opportunity to continue to spread my message to more people. Like that article got read by 175,000 people. Like that's a game-changing article that I just woke up to. Actually, here's the crazy part. So it was actually 2 years to the day that my mom passed away. Exactly 2 years to the day. And so for me, it wasn't even just that flash in the pan. It was a nod again from the universe saying, you're headed in the right direction.
Wow. That's inspiring. That's inspiring. And it sounds like I've noticed you're not doing it for the accolades and all of that. Those are just happening. But even now you're just nonchalant, like, oh yeah, this was nice. And that's not your purpose for doing it. That's just a byproduct of it.
Right. And you're 100% right. Like that's the byproduct of the work, right? Like everything else. So, I look at, the business I've built and the connections I've made and the relationships I've formed. It's all a byproduct of the work that I've done. And this is everything, right? Like I talk a lot now about the 4 pillars of life, which is, to me, it's business, wellness, spirituality, and relationships. And these are the things that I have to focus on every single day and improving on those 4 things in order to create the life that I want. Well, you improve those 4 things by working on yourself, right? Like I used to be really bad at love relationships, like really bad. Like I was not a very good boyfriend to a number of people. And I realized that I needed to get better in order to deserve the woman that I have now, right? My girlfriend now. And so I did the work myself in order to get better with that. And so for me, it's just that constant growth in those main 4 pillars in order to achieve the life I want. And what happens is the financial reward happens. The accolades happen. The podcast growth happens. But it starts with me working on myself every single day to become the person that deserves those types of things, knowing that I'm going to continuously give it back into the world.
Now, I know there's people out there who don't agree with the internal work. I'm not one of them. I've done leadership training. I've done internal stuff as well, and I'm very thankful for it. But what would you say to someone who's like, I don't believe in that, whatever? They just have an aversion to it because they're too whatever.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people that are
men.
like that, you have to almost give them a glimpse into what it would do for them. Whether that's by convincing them to try out some sort of meditation or whatever. But if somebody is still a little too gun shy to do the inner work, that means they're hiding a lot more deep down than they really should be. And that's the people that really need to be looking at themselves. I wouldn't really say anything to convince them otherwise, right? The ego is the enemy, right? From that book by Ryan Holiday. The ego is the enemy. And that's their ego saying, I'm too good for this. But really what they're saying is, I just don't want to unlock those things that I've been carrying around for a long time because that's painful. But what I can tell you is that going through the pain will lead to your purpose, which will lead to your happiness, which will lead to the rewards in your life that you truly seek. When my mom passed away, I actually got blackout drunk 6 to 7 nights a week for 3 months straight. And I was running from the pain, and I was running from the inner work, and I was running from the things that I needed to do to feel better. And so I had a coach at that time, and I remember specifically, she called me one day out of the blue, and I was like, hey, what's up? And she's like, what are you doing tonight? And I said, I'm going out with some buddies. And she goes, no, you're not. You're going to sit and feel this shit. And I go, okay. And that night I started the work. I did a lot of meditation. I did a lot of crying. I went through the pain. But I woke up the next day and I felt 20 pounds lighter. And that was really the beginning of the work for me to be able to step into this purpose and at times carry the weight of what my podcast brings with people reaching out and wanting help and all the things in between. But that was the beginning. It was to sit down and begin that inner work and see those demons and see that sadness and see those things that I was carrying around with pain to get better. And so there's nothing you can do to convince them to change. That's the one thing I've realized. But I can be an example. I can be the person that says I did the work and I got better because of it. And so I don't know, this sounds arrogant, but I would say, watch me, like, see what happens next.
It's not arrogant. I mean, I see it more as confidence, and it's well-deserved confidence because you've gotten to that point where you can say that now. Because I know for a fact, when I got picked on in school and all this stuff, it was like hard to even just answer people, let alone give a straight answer. Or what if that answer goes against the grain of what everyone else is? I mean, there's different levels of it. So to be able to think for yourself freely and say what you want to whomever, I think that's a good place everyone should aspire to. Because I know, whether someone had a traumatic upbringing, a traumatic now, non-existent, great, whatever, there's people that just at the very least are, like you said, that's a much better word, gun shy to say what they really want and what they're thinking. And I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Or what
Dude,
they're
I
feeling,
love that
they're thinking and feeling, I should say.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the stuff about you in school, right? Being afraid to say something. I had a post on Instagram. This was like a year plus ago, where I talked about how when I was in school, I was afraid to raise my hand and ask a question when I didn't understand something because I was afraid of people judging me. Well, guess what, buddy? That led to a 1.7 GPA. So if I just raised my hand and asked the question when I wasn't understanding something, I would have been a lot better off, right? But the interesting part is I then became the most interested person in the world when I became a podcaster. And now I make a living asking questions. So it was a thing I was so afraid of doing before that I now make a living doing. And it's just really that idea of like, look, these fears that we have that are 9 times out of 10 pretty irrational, if we can just face them, we can really begin to create greatness in our life. But we have to face them. We have to say yes, again, to getting uncomfortable, surrounding ourselves with the right people, and then taking action. And that's really what it comes down to.
I kind of wanted to make a joke because I misheard you when you said, so asking the questions is what led to the 1.7. I was like, so that's the secret to the success there. I didn't even ask the questions. But you got me thinking of something recently. My mom recently handed me a pack of envelopes, or an envelope with all the I have my grade school cards she found somewhere, and a lot of it says shows potential, talks too much in class. And to your point of what you do now, it's like your greatest struggle will be your greatest victory. And you don't need to do everything perfect, but at the same point, if you don't feel like you should be doing it, or you're at least questioning it, I feel like you should at least try something different. It doesn't mean do something abrupt and just quit everything within 10 seconds, but I felt that way before too, and it's like I can't even wrap my head around doing something for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years that you just feel horrible about. So to your point of you felt 20 pounds lighter, you felt like a weight was lifted off your shoulder. I know you were talking about spiritual, mental, and physical. What role do you think all the stress and hanging on to the stuff plays physically with people, and how does it manifest? Do you believe it manifests as actual extra weight?
Yeah, 100%. I was a great example of that. And here's how it manifests as extra weight without me getting too woo-woo and spiritual. It manifests itself as like,
you're talking to me. If someone else wants to not listen to it, that's their problem. But I want to know the truth and all the answers, because most of the people do want to know it, and that's why I'm asking.
So first, I'll go surface level. When you're stressed out, when you're unhappy, when you're whatever, you will cope with doing something. So it's not always weight with people. But if you're talking weight, it could be because you're drinking too much. It could be because you're stress eating. It could be because that comfort food that you had as a child, you bring back into your life as an adult, all those. Maybe it's a foot-long meatball sub from Wawa, because that was me. And if you don't know what Wawa is, you're missing out on the greatest convenience store that's in the country, right? So with that being said, It could be any of those things. But then you also have it come through in drug abuse or sex abuse or all these other things, which can manifest itself in ugly ways as well. From a spiritual standpoint, when we are in a low vibrational state, when we are negative, depressed, sad, angry, any of those negative vibrations, low vibration states, we are absorbing negative energy. And so that negative, our bodies want to protect us. And this is where I'm talking about the woo-woo side of weight gain. Our bodies want to protect us. And so in order to protect us, it will store an extra layer of fat in your abdomen, because that's where the energy usually flows into you. And so sometimes we will carry that extra amount of weight if we're in a low vibrational state. So it's very important to continuously do the work to try and stay in a high vibrational state, from that standpoint. So yeah, I mean, it could absolutely physically show in weight gain in some way, shape, or form, whether it's because you're drowning yourself in 10-inch hoagies or 12-inch hoagies, or if you're just carrying around some negative energy.
I'm probably smiling a little bit too much when you're mentioning that stuff, but I appreciate the honesty. I think we all like good food, and that was almost, when I made that unlimited income comment earlier, is like, yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want great food all the time? But at the same token, it's like most of it's pretty rich, and you probably shouldn't be eating it all the time, but whatever. Have a good week. So I want to, with all the people you've helped, whether they're on your show, and I know you do stuff behind the scenes privately, who would you say has been the biggest transformation that you've been able to help? And what was that transformation that you were able to give them?
Not to speak too specifically about people I've worked with, just because I don't really share that information. But I would say, to this point, I've had about 5 or 6 people reach out to me and say because of my show, they decided not to take their life.
Wow.
And when I look at transformation, that's a pretty big one, to decide, okay, I'm worthy. I'm worthy of this life that I'm living, and I can make it better by doing the work, by doing the things that I was afraid to do before. And so from that standpoint, from a helping standpoint, I think that, but more than anything, here's the reality of everything that I'm doing. And I kind of alluded to this early on. I'm on a journey as well, right? Like the Growth Now movement's really about me and my movement and what I need to go through. And so the interviews that I have specifically early on in the show were very much like whatever I was struggling with. Like you can go back early into my show and notice all of a sudden I'm having a clump of relationship experts or a clump of wellness experts, or, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, that's what I was struggling with that right then, because I was seeking answers. But here's the thing, growth never stops. I better be better today than I was yesterday, and I better be better tomorrow than I am today. That's how I live my life. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly absorbing the next thing that I can implement into my life. And so more than anything, the biggest transformation with the Growth Now movement and everything that it's done is me. Like just everything that I've been able to accomplish internally, which obviously has reflected as external wins. I would say that's been the biggest transformation since the beginning of the podcast.
Well, I know you're accomplishing so much, and I'm so glad you are. I appreciate you for sharing that. And if for anyone who is just meeting Justin for the first time, check out his stuff, dive into it, attend the next event, and hook up with him at one of the next podcasting events, because I remember my journey with you, and this is not the end, and you'll still get a chance to promote your stuff, and I'm going to ask you all that, but I legit want everyone to know right now that I'm thankful for you, and I'll never forget. It was my first event. I just launched the show a couple of weeks, and I don't know how many speakers I saw, maybe a dozen or two, but you were definitely one of the, in the top handful, 3 to 5 that I was like, I need to learn more from this guy. So thank you. And I'm glad you still continued to that point when we were connected, because it sounds like early on you were considering giving it up. So I want to say thank you personally.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate those kind words. I mean, now my goal is to be the number one speaker that you saw at Podfest. Now that I'm only in the top 3 or 5. But with that being said, man, I'm honored that you would say that. I'm glad that we've connected. I look forward to staying connected through whatever happens next. Right, like life is crazy. We don't really know. Like you keep mentioning the live events. They're happening. Hopefully one day again they happen again. Like I want to do another Growth Now Movement live. We've shifted a little bit and we've gotten into retreats, which we're doing. The next retreat is in October in New Orleans. I can't wait. Just super excited about that. Obviously keeping within the guidelines, right? Like retreats
And your
are a
virtual
smaller
events are
amount.
great too.
Yeah.
You
Thank
know,
you,
and
man. You know,
what I've noticed is whether it's virtual or in person, a lot of people, I've been doing some of this stuff for a decade or two now. So when people are saying certain things, I'm just like, this is nothing new. But at the same time, I've been saying about hybrid everything because there's always a bigger audience online than there is offline. So whether you have to or you choose to, I have no doubt you'll be doing hybrid like everyone else at some point. And I think that's exciting because your heart has always drawn me to you and your purpose and just seeing how you interact with people and everything. And I have no doubt that, one of the biggest things I hear from the events I speak at is, oh, I wish I could go, but it's too far away. I wish I could go this or that. Internet's only getting faster, and there's no reason that people from around the world can't at least plug in virtually, even if we're, you and I are speaking in a real room, they can still plug in virtually.
Yeah, no, you're right, man. And so I am working with my coach to see what kind of creative thing we can come up with. One thing about me is I like to do things a little bit different. My live event is like literally like a day and a half long rock concert for entrepreneurs. Like it is a blast. I've got dancers that dance the speakers down to the stage. I've got, celebrity speakers, all those things. And so my big thing will be, and this is what I'm trying to figure out, and maybe we can talk offline if you have some ideas, but I want to create that energy anywhere if anybody's watching it anywhere. So if it can happen virtually, we'll do it virtually. If not, reach out to me and we'll find a way to financially get you there. Because I believe in the idea that in order to get the things you need in your life, sometimes you got to show up, you got to get uncomfortable. You got to surround yourself with the right people and you got to take action. Going back to those 3 things, man. And that's what it is about. Hey, it's a little too far, or it's a little too expensive, or it's a little too this. Okay, good. Get a little uncomfortable, right? And I'll share this story quick and then we'll sign off. I know we're running out of time. But I actually had a day job when I had the podcast in the beginning, and I was building a side hustle, right? I was figuring it out, getting a little bit of money, but not enough to cover my expenses. I was also the rich poor guy. I had made good money, but I lived paycheck to paycheck because I was just like, spend it. More is coming. I actually got asked to speak at an event in Florida because of the podcast. And 2 or 3 weeks before I spoke, I got fired from my job unexpectedly. And again, living paycheck to paycheck, I have 2 options here. I can either go to Florida, take the risk, show up, get uncomfortable, or I can pay my rent. I chose to go to Florida. And when I was there, I ended up going out for drinks with a bunch of speakers. Now, keep in mind, I was broke. Went out for drinks with a bunch of speakers. One of them was named Mike Kim. If you don't know who Mike Kim is, look him up. He's phenomenal. He was sitting next to me and he ordered a drink, which happened to be a $65 scotch. And they went around the table and every single speaker said, I'll have the same thing. And they came back to me and I was the last one because I was to the right of Mike. And I said, I'll have the same thing. Keep in mind, I didn't have any money. Waitress comes back, says, can I get you guys anything else? Mike goes, I'll have another one. They go around the table. Everybody says, I'll have another one. Comes back to me. I took a big gulp and I said, I'll have another one. Mike ended up paying for everybody's drinks. But the moral of the story is I learned something from Mike in that conversation that I made $22,000 in the next 3 weeks. And it changed my life completely of how I viewed entrepreneurship, how I viewed business. And there's been no going back since. And that's why when I say get uncomfortable, show up, surround yourself with the right people, and then take action, that's because it's literally that simple. It's literally that simple. And I'm proof of that. And so I would say this to anybody. If you have the opportunity to go to an event, meaning you've been invited, meaning your friend says, hey, you should come with me, meaning you see it on the internet and you go, wow, that looks exciting. I wish I could go. Those are the things that change your life. You and I are having this conversation because both you and I said yes to going to Podfest, right? Like those are the things that change your life. Find a way to go and go. Highly, highly recommend it, man. I appreciate you allowing me that extra time to tell that story because it means a lot to
I'm
me.
so glad you shared it. And I remember when Mike was at your event, he was talking about the whiskey and everything. I didn't know that was the second half of the second side of the story, but I do appreciate you for sharing it. We keep talking about Podfest. Check out episode 111 with Chris Kermitsos. Podfest is awesome. You definitely should go. And
Great guy.
I have a couple more questions for you. One of them is, it's the wheel of whatever. You want yellow or black?
Yellow.
There we go. Look at, you get that question. See it right there?
Well, I don't know what the question is.
There's nothing on there. I make that up.
Oh,
I was going to actually put questions on there, but it's actually more fun to just literally have free reign to ask whatever. So I'll take it easy on you because you've already went pretty deep. Sometimes if people are being surface level, I ask them a super deep question like how do you cure world hunger or something. But my question for you is, who is someone you'd love to connect with that you haven't been able to yet?
Andy Grammer. He's been number one on my list from the beginning of the show. I've gotten close a couple times.
Okay.
Nobody knows him, and I know a lot of people, but Andy Grammer, number one.
Okay, well, that was easy. We're going to thank our sponsor real quick one more time and come back for the imperfect action round. Every business needs a book, including yours. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com today to learn the 7 steps to publish and promote your nonfiction lead and profit-generating business book in 8 weeks. Once again, that's freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com. And we are back with the imperfect action round. Are you ready to take imperfect action?
I'm ready, man.
All right, so I have 3 questions for you, 60-second or less answers. The first one is, what is the fastest path to the cash?
Coaches and mentorship.
Okay, number 2, what is the biggest problem you see your prospects making and the fastest way for them to fix it?
They're too worried about the outside world and they're not worried about what's happening on the inside world. So start doing the inner work.
Ah, yes. And number 3, what is the best way to maximize customer lifetime value?
Give more than they've paid for. I don't know. That's what I take into all my relationships, my customers, my friends. Pour into them as much as you possibly can. I promise you they're never going to leave you.
Great response. Great response. What books would you recommend to Expert Authority World?
It's a great question, man. I just read a bunch of them because I did 75 hard. So I would say Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. If you want to think a little bit bigger, that was probably my most enjoyed book. But number one book that I always recommend is Who Moved My Cheese? It's the one that changed my life.
That's a great one. And thank you for the recommendation on the other one. Where would you like people to learn more?
They can go wherever they're listening to this right now. Just go check out my podcast, The Growth Now Movement. Would love to have them. If they're into podcasting, I launched my first course ever, believe it or not. They can go to purposedrivenpodcaster.com and grab the course there if they're ready to either podcast or take their podcast to the next level.
That's awesome. Congratulations. And thank you for sharing.
No, of course. Thank you, man.
And
this is great.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said this was great. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And I did want to say, I actually do want to connect you with someone. We can talk offline. There's some cool things in regarding the event space that I actually been talking to people about for hybrid, bringing in people virtually and still making it look real.
Nice. Yeah,
it's actually, when you see it, you're going to be blown away with it. But this has been great. I really appreciate the time, and thank you again for sharing.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
All right, Expert Authority World, we have another great episode here today. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and God bless.